Imagine a place that dares to speak truths many are afraid to say. A place that celebrates communities too often forgotten. A place that tells the stories rarely heard, the untold, the overlooked, and the stories that have been told wrong. Or, as my mother would probably correct my English, wrongly. Either way, they haven't been told in the best way or in the proper way or in a truthful way. I invite you to an LA theater that does all this and more. A theater that confronts challenging topics, sparks provocative thought, and amplifies voices that were never meant to be silent, voices that were simply silenced. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, the podcast spotlighting nonprofits and social enterprises with budgets under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Scherck Wittcoff, and I'm excited to be your host. We bring you the less told stories of organizations that are bold, passionate, and making real impact. Perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Small and Gutsy is more than a podcast. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We've recently been ranked number 8 on Feedspot's top 30 social impact podcasts and number 3 and number 9 by Million podcasts for the top 30 volunteer podcasts and for our youth empowerment episodes, respectively. We're proud of these honors, but prouder still of our mission to elevate the visibility of small but mighty change makers. Do you know a nonprofit or social enterprise doing incredible work? Send them our way to laura@smallandgutsy.org. Today, we're exploring the story and mission of the Fountain Theater, a nonprofit performing arts organization located in Hollywood, California, Los Angeles, founded in 1990 by Deborah Culver and Stephen Sachs. The Fountain Theater was created as a creative home for artists from diverse cultural backgrounds. Its mission is to develop and present bold new plays and unique interpretations of established works that reflect the cultural richness and social issues of contemporary Los Angeles and the nation. The theater aims to develop new provocative plays and present unique interpretations of existing works, provide a safe and supportive artistic community for artists from diverse backgrounds, create performances that reflect different cultures and amplify unrepresented voices, and encourage empathy and understanding among audiences through storytelling. For more than 3 decades, the theater has built a reputation for producing thought-provoking performances and supporting voices that may not always be heard on traditional stages. With dozens of world premieres and many regional premieres, the Fountain Theater has become one of the most respected smaller theater venues in Los Angeles. Beyond theater productions, the organization is also known for presenting flamenco performances and running educational outreach programs that connect young people and communities to the arts. Through its work, the Fountain Theater continues to promote empathy, cultural understanding, and community connection through the power of storytelling. The Fountain Theater grew from a small artistic space into an award-winning cultural institution, and its commitment to diversity, inclusion, and community storytelling remains more important than ever. And I have to share with my audience, I was invited to a theater production, which my guests will talk about in a moment, which was moving. And I want to add, there was audience participation, which I thought was such a learning moment for everyone. And I just loved connecting with other audience members, and I went by myself, and it was just an incredible experience. So I'm excited to introduce my 2 amazing guests today, Johannah Maynard Edwards. And Johannah, if I mispronounce your name, please, jump in there when I introduce you fully, is the managing director of the Fountain Theater. Prior to joining the Fountain, Johannah served as executive artistic director of the National Women's Theater Festival in Raleigh, North Carolina, where she produced, directed, and championed hundreds of productions by artists of unrepresented genders. A nationally recognized leader in arts accessibility, Johannah received the Kennedy Center's Lead Award for Emerging Leaders, and she is chief ambassador for PAAL, the Parent Artist Advocacy League. She is passionate about developing new sociopolitical work and fostering equitable, inclusive spaces for artists and audiences alike. My second guest is Raymond O. Caldwell. the artistic director. Prior to the Fountain, Raymond was the artistic director at Washington, D.C.'s Theater Alliance for 6 seasons, where he directed, developed, and produced socially conscious, thought-provoking programming that transformed the region and had global impact. Under the leadership, Theater Alliance was chosen to lead an American Arts Envoy with the U.S. Department of State. He devised and directed the new work, A Global IDEA, or IDEA, with 23 artists and activists from Bangladesh, Nepal, India, and the United States that explores what inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility mean on the global stage. Fabulous. He's developed and led similar international programming promoting cultural preservation, LGBTQIA plus rights, disability advocacy, peace building, and countering violent extremism, human trafficking, and gender-based violence. In addition to his international work as an educator, Raymond was a faculty member and resident director at Howard University's Department of Theater Arts. He was part of the National Arts Strategy Executive Leadership Group at Harvard, holds an MFA in acting, new play development from Ohio State University, and a BFA in acting from the University of Florida. Phew! Woo! Both my guests are absolutely incredible, and I am so excited to have you meet them. Johannah, being the managing director, I'm going to start with you. You also have a rich history like Raymond does. You are like the dynamic duo out there doing your stuff for the rest of us.
We found each other.
You found each other.
Raymond and I found each other.
I love it. So tell me how this came about for you. And what drives you in this work? Because clearly you're at the Fountain for very specific reasons, and you're both relatively new there. And I was fortunate enough to go to a theater production that was incredibly provocative. And it was also a history lesson for me in a lot of ways, things I knew but didn't fully know. And I'll let Raymond talk about that because I think you directed that, right? Raymond, did you direct that?
Yeah. I did.
Okay.
I did.
So, Johannah, let's start with you and then we'll move to Raymond. So what drives you in this space?
Well, all the things you read in my bio are my drivers. I just have a heart for nonprofit and a heart for service and justice. And my passion is theater making. And so I like to be a part of and build on nonprofits that merge the arts and storytelling and the good work and the pure essence of what it means to serve a mission as fully and faithfully as you can. And how I got into it, I'm sure Raymond can say more because it really was this like cosmic poof.
I love cosmic poofs. When they happen, you have to embrace them. Okay, go. That was so cute.
Gotten more just into the nonprofit consulting space. I was really just working to share my nonprofit arts startup knowledge with other folks. And I saw a job listing to be a part-time grant writer for the Fountain Theater. So I submitted for that. And I don't know, I guess Raymond liked my resume.
He liked you for more than a grant writer. Okay, clearly.
That's what happened. Yeah, we just had I know it was a job interview, but it really did feel like a meeting of a long lost soulmate.
Oh,
that I was like,
that.
I'll go with this person. I'll build something with this person. And that's just how it happened.
And it almost sounds like you came home. You found your home in some ways with each other. And the theater is the framework for that home or the foundation based on the founders sort of stepping aside and leaving space for the two of you. And it's quite remarkable. And I think, as I said in my opening, and I think this is so true, and certainly my experience of going to a performance, is there are so many silenced voices out there, and they can be so invisible and so dismissed. And it's our obligation to bring them forward and share their incredible work and open other people's eyes in ways that maybe they hadn't expected. And I think when you don't have to think about something, you don't. And I love that good theater forces you to think about something in this context. I admire you both and really appreciate that. So you have been there for not so long.
Not long at all. It was just slightly over a year ago. I mean, Raymond, I bet we could find the exact date that this happened.
We've never looked up that exact date. That's so funny.
Because we are right around our 1 year meet-iversary.
I love that. Oh, that's so cute.
I was still living in North Carolina, so I happened to be in LA visiting my sister when they called. I was like, yeah, I could come in. Let's do this interview in person.
I love it.
And so that was this time last year. And then my role evolved and I moved to California in August. So
I bet your sister is thrilled to have you close by.
I'm in her bed in her apartment right now. She is very thrilled, as is the owner of these headphones.
I love those headphones. I think those are great. She gets special kudos. Is that your niece? Your niece's headphones? Yeah, she gets special kudos for those headphones. I thought maybe they were yours, and they really could have been. I think that
she's
would be
really
okay.
Become quite the fixture at the Fountain Theater in and of herself.
That's also pretty wonderful. So, Raymond, I'm going to toss it to you. You have an incredible background also, and both professionally and personally that brings you to this work and honors ethnic diversity as well as artistic diversity. And so share whatever you feel like sharing. But I do think that weighs heavily on what you bring to the table in a beautiful way.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And I just got to LA last July. And so I took over the company after Stephen stepped down last January. So also really relatively new. When this opportunity became available, I had already stepped down from my previous company. And I told my agent, I had told my network, I had told my community, I'm not going to do leadership. I need to take a break. I need to just breathe and be out of nonprofit space. I had been in nonprofit space for the last decade. And so I needed a break. And then I got to California and this opportunity became available. And my agent called me and she was like, listen, you are never going to find another company whose values align so beautifully with yours. And it just so happened that my agent also was Stephen Sachs' agent. And so she knew him and what he was building and his style of work. And so I threw my hat in the ring. And I actually, through every step of the process, was like, I'm not going to do this. I kept telling my husband, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I just want to have the conversation. And every step of the way, every conversation I had, every time I looked through the history of the 35 years of this amazing organization, I just couldn't say no. And it was also so clear, that the Fountain was moving into a new generation. It's what was necessary. Mm-hmm. And so when I met Johannah and when we started first in that development space, we started having these smaller conversations, about the type of cultural institution that we were interested in building and crafting. And I just found so much synergy with not only her background, but her ideas and what it is she was also interested in building. And I think about that as an artistic director and executive leader, how are we finding folks who we have this type of synergy with and building with them?
And it's not that often, it's not that often that you do.
No.
And also, I just need to comment that I think sometimes having been in the nonprofit space for a very long time, it's very hard for founders to move on.
Indeed.
Because this is their baby, right? That's become an adolescent. And then someone's going to take it to mature adulthood, at 35 years, but you know what I mean. And so it's hard because you may change direction slightly based on their current environment. And so I give kudos to that process.
Yeah, and it's really beautiful because when Stephen stepped away, I worried. I had a lot of conversations with the board and even Stephen as I was transitioning into this role because I understand what it is to take over from a founder. And so the fact that we were really hyper intentional in that transition, I think helped smooth much of that. And it is so nice to see the Fountain family, the folks who have built this organization, continuing to show up. And also that we're building a new generation of audience and Fountain family as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It's exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really exciting and it's a beautiful space. I don't know if either one of you want, and you don't have to, talk about sort of your personal background that brought you into either the nonprofit space or to this current position. Were there any things in your background that sort of drove you to the nonprofit space or to this particular social justice model within the theater movement?
Yeah, for me, it started with being a theater maker and being a director, deviser, writer. In school and in our training, they teach us like, be prepared for nobody to hire you, that if you want to get anything done, you're going to have to learn how to do it yourself. So, I became a self-producer at 16, 17, 18, 19 years old because I
Wow.
wanted to make the work. And I actually founded my first 501c3 when I was 19, a sophomore at NYU, and
Fabulous.
I couldn't get the opportunity to direct the pieces I wanted to direct through school. So we formed a nonprofit. We
I love
started working with the field and started renting venues around Lower Manhattan to do that exploration of work. And then particularly as a woman, one of the things that I found was that at that time in the early 2000s when I was coming up, they were making space for one of everything. Like one woman got to rise to the top. One Black person got to rise into the club. And so experiencing all those inequities, and then the more I learned about intersectionality and my position of privilege as a white woman, and then how all the different intersections of other people's lives were making it more or less hard for them to get to do the things that I knew I wanted to do and was looking for a community. So basically, nonprofit for me was a vehicle of self-producing and then creating a network to support other self-producers and teach others into self-producing so that their voices could be heard and they didn't have to wait for a gatekeeper to open the gate.
I love that because it creates true agency. Like you really have an opportunity to say, who am I? I am these multiple identities and I want my story told, whatever story that is, or I want to participate in a story that resonates with me. And if someone isn't going to help me do it, I'm going to do it myself. And you gave folks a platform to be able to do that, or the know-how. Both are incredibly valuable. So it's just, talk about gutsy at age 17, 18, 19. Pretty darn amazing. So I love that. Not that many people, I have to say, are brave enough to do that. It's a really interesting realization how brave and how gutsy, frankly, you were at that time and still are, probably.
I was 40 before I realized that not everybody wanted to lead. So to me, that was just a natural thing. And Raymond has similar stories too. Oldest child.
I love that.
I'm an oldest daughter.
Funny. Oh, that's really funny.
Oh, everyone doesn't want a chance to do this part of it? No?
That is so funny. That I never really thought about it that way. I have an oldest daughter. I don't know. In some areas, I think she would feel that way. In other areas, she wouldn't necessarily. So I think it's more the risk. And I think you've both appropriately ignored this, which I'm really happy about, is the risk is how are other people going to judge our work?
Yeah.
So you always have to be aware, but if it almost puts you in a position to say, if someone's going to judge it, it's safer not to do it. And you're like, no way, we're doing it. We're doing it and we'll just keep getting it and making it better. So I'm impressed. Like, I think this was part of your genetic makeup from very early on. I just do. And I think we're all better off because of it. So thank you, Johannah. Really appreciate it. Raymond, do you want to share a little bit about how you got into this work? Because you both have this long history and legacy.
Yeah.
And I think it influences the work that you choose and do. And I love that.
Absolutely. I was born and raised in Germany. My mother is a Filipino living in Germany. My father's African American. So international work has always been the center of what I wanted to do, what I was always interested in. I started this work as an actor. I had the BFA. And so I was actually touring. I was on a lot of stages doing a lot of work that I didn't believe in.
Just to be able to put food on your table, at that time. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And, at that time, I was starting to become really frustrated with the fact that I wasn't in control of the narratives that I was performing on stage. And I thought that they were
Beautifully said.
They were reductions of my Black experience. And so one of my mentors, Antizaki Shange, I was on her tour, and she actually inspired me to go to graduate school, to go make. Don't wait for someone to give you a story. You have an imagination enough to make. Go make. And so I ended up going to grad school. And after grad school, I moved to London for a while and was working there. And my visa was running out. And my mom was like, oh, good, you're going to come home to Germany. And I was like, no.
Yeah, like, no.
And so I randomly applied to a lot of the work that I was doing in London was working with young people in predominantly Black and Caribbean communities. And so that was a work that was really passionate for me. And then I found out that Arena Stage was attached to Living Stage. And the Living Stage was the type of work that inspired me. It's the type of work I studied in graduate school. And so I applied for a fellowship, got that fellowship, and after a year of that fellowship, joined the staff at Arena Stage and was there for 8 years. And so I learned about the nonprofit, and I cut my teeth in the nonprofit space at the largest regional theater in the United States. And so I was spoiled in that, and in that, while there, I got to expand programming and take Arena Stage's programming of new play development all around the world. And by about year 8, I was really exhausted, and I was tired of the nonprofit, and I was tired of constantly seemingly having to grow. It seemed, particularly when you're at the top, it seems exhausting. And so I wanted to take a break. And so I left and went to academia. And while at Howard, I wanted to understand, well, what is the type of organization I do want to lead? And what is the organization I do want to create, both from the art and from a very culturally specific standpoint? And so then that led me to leading Theater Alliance. It was my first stint in artistic directorship.
Wow.
And I loved it. And I was so proud of what we built and the work that we did. So yeah, I had a lot of fun growing up in the nonprofit space and learning a lot about that nonprofit space. And it's lovely to be here at the Fountain with Johannah and using those skills that we both have gained through our very long careers now. You blink and you suddenly are like, oh, I'm now the adult.
We're the grown-ups.
Right. What happened? I know. I do want to comment. I think it's in a way magical that you had this realization. It's probably not magical, but it became a part of your magical journey. The realization that you don't like the characters that you're being asked to portray. It maybe was one small piece, but we so easily as a society pigeonhole people based on our assumptions, our lens, our upbringing of what they should be or what they are. And we're much more complex than that. And so the fact that you not only had that realization, but thought, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be continuing a partially false narrative of someone else's view of the character that I'm being asked to play. And so I just admire that because, again, like Johannah, you had guts to say, this isn't me. This doesn't fit me. So that puts you as a hugely dynamic team, because I want to hear tell us about the Fountain Theater, what its origins are in social justice. That was its underpinnings, but you have to address current time. And I'm sure it's changed from 1990 to now. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you've confronted or you think about confronting and where you see it going, because you've also introduced dance, which I'm not sure was part of its original mission, but it may have been. I don't know.
The Fountain has been producing work for the last 35 years. And when you look at the production history, you see an organization responding always to the moment, looking at what is happening and asking, how are we using the art and the stage to start conversations about where we are culturally? And so I'm really honored to stand on those shoulders. And when I think about the work that we've been programming since we've arrived, it's been really interesting. My very first show that I programmed, as that show was on stage, we in LA were dealing with the fires. And it just so happened that that show dealt with the intersection of loss and traumatic loss through an environmental disaster. And so the parallels, the immediate response to that, the night that we were producing White Rabbit, Red Rabbit was the night that we were in Iran. And so it's been really interesting to think about how it is we are responding. As we were producing Fly Me to the Sun, we were dealing with ICE here in LA. And that play was a narrative about a young Salvadoran boy and his relationship with his grandmother. And so here now we are producing poetry for the people. And
I
here
love
we
that.
are, again, responding to the time. And so it's what I love that we do, here at the Fountain. And even when I think about our other alt programming, like the flamenco programming, which has always been a staple here because Deborah Lawler, who was one of the founders, loved flamenco. I think about
I didn't know that.
flamenco as an art form that is responsive to the community that's in the room. We're expanding into classical Indian dance, and that also is an opportunity to respond to what's happening in art and through art. So that's the Fountain Theater's bread and butter. And I think that I am just so honored to be a part of programming an organization that does responsive work this way.
It's amazing how tuned in you are to what happens in the environment, because it's almost predictive in some way. I'm not sure what that formula is, but it's really interesting. And I think at least what I got to see was a bit of a historical retrospective, and then the realization that current times haven't really traveled that far into gender equity, racial equity, sort of all of the touch points. And I also loved, and I don't know that you do this in every theater production, but I was surprised by the audience participation and enamored by it at the same time, because there was no pressure, but it was an invitation to share, and made you think about people in your life, and made you think about being in a classroom to a certain extent, and producing and having your own ability to do that. So it was all different kinds of things, and how you would leave a little differently than when you came in, which I think is the point of theater anyway. So you had an active participatory way to do that. So Johannah, I didn't know if you wanted to respond to that.
I would, because I wasn't a part of the making of the piece, just the other aspects of the business. And so I saw it in previews and in the opening weekend. And then I hadn't seen it again until this past weekend. And the two things is that the cyclical nature of activism, and a comfort in that, and also a question about how, okay, I'm a part of a legacy of people like June, and I can choose to lean in to her example that was fearless and full of love. Or if I need to take a break from my activism, that's okay too. But it drew that to the consciousness. And then also to the piece, Lara, that you're talking about, the participation aspect. I think it was genius the way that Raymond and Adrienne layered that in, because
Loved it.
started with you thinking about someone you love. So for me, just about every time it's time to write that first poem, I'm writing about my son, or I'm writing about my niece. I'm writing about someone very close to me. And then before you know it, by the end of the night, you are thinking about your wishes for the whole world. And so you take that own microcosm of your own life in your own close circle, and you expand that circle out. And that's just so brilliantly what June was asking of us, that they did it and brought us into it by the end.
I love your summary piece of that, because I only got to see it one time and I was so moved. I loved the fact that June was an advocate, and it was through the lens of love. It was not through the lens of anger. And she had every right given her. For the audience that doesn't know, she had a very rough early childhood. And she's a poetess, but I think her surrounding environment never thought she was going to be anything. And she really overcame a lot of those personal things, and did it all without anger or resentment. Doesn't mean she didn't have it, but she really used her advocacy in a way that was embracing and accepting. It was amazing, actually. It was a beautiful show.
Yeah.
So how did you come about choosing that particular show?
I started writing this show 3 years ago with Adrienne Torf. We only wrote it because I was supposed to direct June's opera. I was looking at the ceiling and then I saw the sky. But because of the pandemic, we couldn't do the opera. But it started me down a rabbit hole of reading all of June's poetry. And soon I was reading June's essays, and soon I was watching videos about June. And soon I was so mesmerized and sad at the fact that I didn't know who June Jordan was. And here I was, a Black academic who had been at Howard University. And I was like, how did I not know this? And if I didn't know it, I bet a bunch of people in my community probably also didn't know who June Jordan was. So it started as a radical act of trying to teach people who June Jordan was. And so I called
June Jordan was, yeah.
I called up Adrienne Torf and I was like, hey, I want to teach people about June. And so we started talking every morning, sometimes 3 times a week. And she started telling me stories about her lifelong collaborator, her partner. And soon we got an iteration of the first iteration of the script. And then we learned from that. We got a couple of awards for that. And then we did it again. But this time I wanted to be sure again that June's words were in community. And so that tour performed in art galleries and community centers, in libraries. And then when I came here to the Fountain and became the artistic director, I wanted to take this piece to the West Coast because, you know, much of June's work was up in Berkeley. And so we rejudged that this version of the script, again, is new. The audience participation component is brand new. And the retrospective of June's students, the lens of June as teacher, shifts in this draft. And so that's how it got here. You know, it's so rare to be able to have 3 times at making a play better. You know, usually you produce a play and you get it, and that's it. And so the fact that we've gotten 3 chances at it, I think speaks to how and why the community aspects that you both are talking about that you experience, because we've been testing this with communities literally all around the country now. And so now to be here in LA, building community with folks is just, it's so beautiful.
That's incredible. And also, I think that it is a natural iterative process that sometimes other performances don't have the opportunity to do, but you've given the space to be able to do that. And also having written it because you couldn't direct another show of her, another, you know, her other show gave, I think, the opportunity for her to be known as an entity in and of herself. So for what her contributions have been, and they've been vast. And I had never heard of her either. I was embarrassed to say, but I just thought she was prolific. And she was so, like, when you saw the videos of her, she was so soft-spoken. There was just something so calming about her, right? And in some ways so non-judgmental, like just like I could just see her being a professor and welcoming sort of creative ideas, and that we all have them inside ourselves. So I thought it was fabulous. Congratulations on that, because it was a huge success. And the iteration as it is now, I think, is one I hope you keep around for a long time, because it's just, to me, it worked. I mean, again, I didn't see the others, but I think having the audience engaged in that way is exactly how Johannah talked about it in our own personal metamorphosis in that moment of time and what we were going to leave with, which I love. You know, it's a peace and love, for lack of a better way to say it, but we need so much more of that, right? So when you think about the things that you've been a part of from the perspective of theater, are there any aha moments for you both? That was sort of one, I think, that we just talked about a little bit. But any sort of things that were aha, oh, that's amazing, and I didn't think about that, or aha, oops, we didn't think about that. Either one. Like, we're open for all of that because they're interesting. How many plays do you usually do, or productions do you do a year?
We usually do 3 to 4 a year with lots of alt programming wrapped in and through.
It's great.
You know, one of the, I will say, you know, and because it's small and gutsy and we're talking about it, you know, one of the things that surprised me, continues to surprise me, is audience cultivation and maintenance. After 35 years, our audience are aging, right? And our audience base, and when we think about the regional theater, the folks who have been supporting and building the regional theater are from a certain generation. And what we're noticing is that generation is retiring, dying, and or no longer physically able to come and participate in the same ways that they did in the 90s. Because in the 90s, driving from Santa Monica to Hollywood was fun.
Right, it was nothing. Right, you're so right. Yes. True.
And so
Yes.
the thing that is really surprising, the aha for us, is that audience building and audience cultivation, bringing in a community, is a constant effort. And that we can't rest on what was considered our legacy audience any longer, and that we need to build new audience while also honoring everything that our legacy audience have built.
Such a good
Yeah.
point.
So it's a fine balance, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And how do you do that when there's so much distraction for younger generations? Just are. I see it in my classrooms all the time, that it's really hard to kind of get at least my minor grad students sort of focused on what's at hand when there are just so many distractions taking them away. And I feel like there's also distractions in areas that don't help them go deeply, but stay surface a little bit. And sometimes that feels safer, but it's less interesting, engaging, intellectual, motivating. I mean, there's a lot of things that are challenging about that.
It's all relational. What we're finding and what we find over and over and over again is it's one-to-one, it's relational. And so if Raymond or I can't be everywhere all the time, making those one-to-one connections, then our job is to empower our staff, empower our board, empower every patron and every artist who comes in the door, to inspire them to want to do that one-to-one work along with us so that we can welcome in communities. And I don't say community singular, because that's one thing, again, that you learn over time in nonprofit, but also that I'm learning quickly about LA is community means something different to every person. This is something Raymond and I talk about. And also the communities we serve as a nonprofit, there are many, and sometimes they overlap and sometimes they don't. And so learning about what it is that each of these individuals and each of these communities that individuals identify into, what do they need from us? And how do we share what it is we have with them? It's not enough to just say, oh, yeah, that thing you want, it's right here. All you got to do is come in the door.
Come. Yeah, show up.
How do you get people to take the good medicine?
And how do you expose them to something that maybe they haven't been exposed to before? So in terms of getting into these various communities, do you go into them and do pieces of performances? How does that work? Because it's got to be hard. You know, your shows are at the Fountain. You want people to come there, experience it. It's a small, intimate theater. It's amazing. But as you pointed out, it can be out of the way for some people. But hopefully the turnover, even in the area, becomes of interest. So how do you market in that way? Because that's tough.
Yeah, it really is. And I want to speak to something you were talking about earlier, this idea of distraction. And I think this distraction is happening across generations. We're seeing it with young people. We're also seeing it with that older generation as well, who have now entered Facebook and who are distracted in that space. And so it's so interesting.
It's so
you know,
true.
like, we're trying to do something really difficult. And I think the difficult thing that we're doing is trying to combat the pandemic that we're actually not talking about. And it's a pandemic of loneliness. And that pandemic of loneliness fueled by this incessant need to be connected through social media. And so,
because it's so less real. Yes,
absolutely,
you're so right.
Absolutely. And, you know, like, I think about June often talked about the import of corporeal relationships, the importance for us to be in community together and with one another. And so we're trying to get people of multiple generations to put down their phones and come be together. And that can feel really, really impossible. And so we're starting with thinking about, of course, the work that we're doing. What is the work that's going to lure all of these communities into our space? But the other thing we're attempting to do is we're attempting to be in community with folks, meeting and moving the Fountain outside of our traditional space and meeting folks in other communities. As we're developing work this season, we'll be in communities all over West Hollywood, East Hollywood, and a few other locations. Because we want to meet audience where they are, build a relationship with them, build trust with them.
And then invite them.
And then invite them.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So can you give an example of how that might be? I think that's brilliant. And I love that you're doing that. I didn't know how realistic that would be. So I'm so happy you're so creative. So give us an example, if you can, how that might look.
Yeah, a great example of that is our next play that we'll be developing. We are really excited to be developing Beth Kander's new play, Return. It is a wild, wild play that is so fascinating, that has so many intersections of both grief and religion. And so as we develop this play, we want to put that play and develop that play in community. So it will be read at a series of faith communities throughout Los Angeles. And we're starting conversations with folks about what it is they're hearing, what it is they're experiencing, and what more they're interested in. This is going to give Beth the opportunity to continue to develop her play through a community lens, but then also generate excitement for audiences and let them know, hey, we're in community with you. Now come join us next season when we actually produce this play on our stage.
You know, I come from an organization development, social work, nonprofit background, and this reminds me so much of a really good focus group.
Right.
Right? In
Precisely.
some ways.
That's exactly what it is.
I love this because the way that people want to know how their input is going to be used. And so Beth, or whoever's kind of conducting it in a way, can talk about, you know, I'm here to gather input that may get incorporated in this next iteration.
Right.
How fantastic is that?
In theater, as you develop a play for an audience, playwrights and directors all often employ a very special member of the team called a dramaturg. And so the dramaturg is there to help facilitate how this play gets received by an audience. And so what we've been calling this is community dramaturgy. So we're going to get the feedback of all those communities. And I can speak of another area where we're trying to meet the audiences where they are in the marketing and communication space. We have to accept that people are now digitally native. They are in a digital third space. And so we need to meet them there to try to lure them to our physical space. And so we're working on how do we create content and engagement strategies online that will entice folks off of the phone and into the building. So you have to do this from every angle of 100%. Where are people, where do we find them, how do we go to them?
You know, in that vein, I think whatever engagement strategies you can use is paramount. So if people give input or you ask a question or you have some kind of dynamic thing that takes place, that's when people respond. But I sort of wonder in that, and it scares me a little bit, are we changing our brains? Are our brains changing a little bit in the way of how we take in information? Rather than sit with something, do we use a sound bite as a final note on something? And that is sort of, it's concerning because you don't dig deeply into areas. And what you guys are doing is digging deeply into areas and asking people to dig deeply in themselves to provide feedback. And I love that and also recognize what a huge challenge that is.
We're really centering this idea of community. Like, how are we creating spaces where people can be together to have the difficult conversation? There's something that happened after the pandemic where we kind of stopped talking to each other. We stopped listening to each other. And then we survived this major, some of us survived this major event in our lives and then never dealt with the trauma, just went back out into the world and tried to human again. And so I think it's really the goal of our cultural institutions, particularly cultural institutions like the Fountain, to give us places to practice humaning again. You know, how do we practice hearing an idea that we find really difficult and sitting with it and then holding space with other people to talk about it? Our communities are how we're going to move past these troubling times.
Yeah, I think that's really true because, you know, it's a natural human feeling to want to connect with someone else. And what was interesting when I went to the June Jordan play, what I loved about it so much is when people were asked in the audience to read their piece if they wanted to, they volunteered if they wanted to. It actually brought the rest of us in. You almost became connected to that person who was sharing, right? Because you either could relate to it or think, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And it brought me closer to other members of the audience without ever having formally met them.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing about praying in, you know, community, chatting in community focus groups. You connect with people. Doing anything in community can feel that way. So I love that you're doing that. Is the summer for you a little bit of a downtime or is it like total prep time? Oh my God. Joanna's like,
No.
no, it's not.
Is there downtime in nonprofit
Right,
or
right.
producing?
Never. Yeah, forget it. What was I thinking? I'm crazy. Okay, so share a little bit about what your summer looks like. Like what happens in the summer for you all?
So this summer, and like many summers in the past, we usually center and focus in on our education programming. We call our education programming at the Fountain impact and engagement because we're thinking about what is the engagement and how do we measure the impact on communities. So during the summers, we work with a subset of young people in our Fountain Voices program. And these young people come together and for part of the summer, they volunteer with a nonprofit organization that is doing work within Los Angeles. And then the other part of their time, they're working with us to develop a play to amplify the needs of that nonprofit. We're trying to reinforce the idea
what a
of
brilliant idea.
we're trying to reinforce the idea of civic engagement. We're trying to center volunteerism and then advocacy within young people. And so those young people will build a play, and then that play will hopefully perform at the site that they volunteered and also at the Fountain Theater.
I love that. How many students do you usually take? And is it application? How do you determine who's going to be in that program, which I love? I think it's, again, another brilliant idea.
It is traditionally by application. We have a number of students in the Hollywood area, particularly at Hollywood High School, because they are our community and our partner school. A number of the students come from Hollywood High School, but we'll accept applications from students all over Los Angeles.
I love it. And do they choose the nonprofit or do you help them find it, or how does that work?
We already identify the nonprofit for them because it's about also setting up volunteer opportunities with that organization and being sure that that organization is giving these young people volunteer experiences that are going to influence the writing of their play. So the connectivity of that is important.
And how many organizations do you usually work with for that summer program?
This summer, it's going to be one, possibly two. We're having conversations now about running this program in two separate locations and having two groups of young people build simultaneously. We'll know more about that when we find out about funding, which is the always the nonprofit joy.
It is. It's the one thing we hate the most, but it is unfortunately the necessity.
I'm just working on those grants.
Yeah. Thank goodness for those.
Tell that story.
Hallelujah.
Get that money.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, tell that great story. But you know what? Particularly for students who get to satisfy their community service,
Right.
they get to learn about the inner workings of theater. They get to learn about the inner workings of a nonprofit. They get to then be creative and put pen to paper and say, okay, how can I make this story come alive that represents their, because it's a group, collective interpretation of what this means. And it could be far afield. It could be, you never know. And I think that just hits on so many fantastic points for students to gain tremendous growth from that experience. So I love that. And I would imagine you have students continuing on in theater as a result.
Also, the benefit to the audience, as we've been talking about audience building and multi-generational audiences, what a benefit and a gift to our audience to get to experience watching young people who have put their ideas and their thoughts about the world and ways to solve problems that we're having in front of them. I mean, everyone benefits. Everyone wins.
Everyone benefits. So what I love about that, I teach a graduate class at USC and it's in the policy school, but it is a capstone class, actually. If I have 5 groups of 5 students working with 5 different organizations, some on the East Coast, some on the West Coast, and they're doing exactly that. They are trying to figure out in a creative way, and then they'll give a presentation. But I love your model so much because the best way to be a consultant is to live inside the organization for a period of time. So the more exposure my students can get by site visits, having meetings, interviewing as many people as they can connected to the organization, focus groups, all of that. And so, they're grad students and you're doing this with high schoolers. I love it because it also gives them a way forward in engaging that they may not have thought of previously. Like, how do you gather information? How do you really listen? How do you ask questions? How do you participate in something? And what's your experience in doing that? It's very cool. And it gives these organizations also a different perspective because they get to see a play about whatever the issue is that maybe they're trying to solve or about their community that could be looked at in a new way. So I love that. It's a brilliant idea.
We've kind of lost relationship to volunteerism, and volunteerism is actually how we are in community with one another. It's how we can be with people who we don't necessarily know or who are in our first circle. And so, yeah, I love this program, and I love what the young people learn through the program. The goal isn't to make any of these young people actors or directors or performers or playwrights. If they end up that, fantastic.
Right.
But what the program,
not the point.
Yeah, the program really gives them a lot of professional development. And we've heard from students in the past how it's prepared them for college readiness, how it's prepared them for college interviews. So we're really proud of this program, and we're particularly really excited about it this summer because the subject matter that the students are going to be delving into is so hyper-local and so important. So yeah, can't wait.
I love it. So crazy idea, but I'm going to throw it out there. Wouldn't it be interesting? And I know this is not the population you necessarily want to fully attract, but early retirees, just hear me out.
Oh, yes.
I would do the same.
Yeah,
oh,
it is.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I would do the same program, but they would pay because even if they're volunteering, they're paying for worry less about the funding. It would be a donation. And they get to participate in exactly the same type of program, but for a different organization. I think it'd be incredible. I would do that program in a heartbeat.
Our hope is to grow this program so that there are different ensembles, and that's what we call them, groups. Each of the groups are a different ensemble.
I love that.
So there are ensembles all over LA. The other program that we're really looking to tap into that generation is in and around storytelling. Storytelling is a space of programming that we're really going to jump into, because it is a beautiful way to build community as well. So, yeah.
It's incredible. You learn so much about people in the frame of storytelling.
Yeah.
And it is such a way to connect people. It's such a connector. It's such a beautiful, I don't think we've lost the art. I think we've replaced it in ways that are less soulful. I can't think of another word, or less like touching our hearts in certain ways. And unfortunately, parts of the internet have ways to grab you that are, manipulative, because that's what marketing sometimes is. And that's just part of life, and I get it. But storytelling is, you want to have these great hooks and catches and turns and twists and ways to describe something that are genuine. They have a genuine quality and very purposeful, not for the purpose of, I want you to buy this, I want you to do that. It's such a different, the purpose is, I want to share a piece of who I am with you or my experience with you. So I love it. I think that's great. It's incredibly exciting. So you guys have a lot in front of you, and you are both really prepared in this beautiful way to do this. And I'm so impressed. Now that I've been to one, I can't wait to go to more and to now be exposed and get there and enjoy myself and be part of that community, because it is so enriching. That's the best word I can think of. It's really an enriching experience. So I thank you both for making that happen. So toward the end of my podcast, I have a round of quick and gutsy questions if you are ready. What is at the top of your wish list for the Fountain Theater? However, you're not going to like this. However, the answer can't be money or funding. I know. Because that would be everybody's answer, right? So I had to put a caveat in there.
I would say volunteers and community participation. And what I mean by community participation is, like, we're really trying to anchor the organization into East Hollywood and the community that is walking distance from the Fountain Theater. And so top of my list is building those relationships, sowing those seeds. Because if you can walk to this theater, then there's no reason, there is not a barrier for your participation.
That's a good point.
Mine was just continuing to develop our staff, because we have a very good team. They are awesome. And so I know that it probably takes money to get there, but all the ways that we can offer professional development, just centering them in what we're trying to build and how we're doing it, because they are sensational.
First, I have to say, as a manager, to think of your staff that way first, it says everything anyone needs to know about you right there. Because it is those combination of things. It's bringing people in and getting people to know about the theater, and it's supporting the people who are already doing the work. And I rarely get that as a response. And so I'm really impressed that because they hold the table up.
Yep.
And they often sometimes don't get a lot of credit, and funding is tight, and they're still there every day holding the table up. And I'm really impressed that you recognize that and do a shout out to your staff. So here's a shout out to the Fountain staff,
Yeah.
Fountain Theater
They're
staff.
great.
I
They're
love
amazing.
it. It's great. They're amazing. So if you could think of a song that describes the Fountain Theater, what would it be?
I can't think of a song, but while Raymond thinks, one of the things that Raymond and I connect over a lot is our love of emergent strategy and the writings of Adrienne Marie Brown. And one of the tenets of emergent strategy that I quote a lot around our theater is critical connection over critical mass. And
Love it.
that
Mhm.
is such a big piece of what we're trying to build. And again, coming back to the staff, it's like, hey, if there was 25 people in the house tonight, that's not a failure. That's a critical connection you've made.
I love that.
And so
Mhm.
that's the work we're doing. We're creating these
Mhm.
critical connections.
Mm-hmm. I love that because it's like, I know several artist friends of mine, and they talk about the difference between sort of their original work that they're really proud of, and that they don't want to mass produce something just for the sake of getting more money, frankly. And so I have a lot of respect for that. There's nothing wrong with mass production. I get it. But I love what you said, because it really is about how are you changing an individual and what are you staying true to? That should be a lyric in a song if it's not, but it's a lyric. Yeah. Yeah. Raymond, anything that comes up for you?
Yeah, I'm going to bend the rules because I think that June Jordan was a lyricist as well.
She
And so
was. Yeah.
I'm going to use a line of poetry of June's that we actually don't
I
use in
love
the
her
show.
stuff.
But
Mhm.
June once wrote, "We are the ones we've been waiting for." And it is one of
Oh,
my
I love it.
favorite ideas, particularly as we think about building community. Sometimes we make assumptions that we can't or that we won't be accepted into that space. And it's like, no, honey, we are the ones we've been waiting for. And
Been waiting
so,
for. I love that.
yeah.
It's along the philosophy of choose yourself.
Yeah.
I just love that so much. And we often don't do that because of societal norms, because of fears, because of this, because of that. So I love that. Those are both wonderful. I love them. They're great. I'm going to remember both of those. So what makes the Fountain Theater gutsy? You're definitely gutsy. What makes you gutsy?
Well, what makes us go? What doesn't make us gutsy?
What doesn't make us gutsy? I love it.
That
You're
might
on
be-
Small and Gutsy. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to talk about the living ticket. And I'm
Yeah,
going to talk
good.
about how we got here.
Yeah.
Because what happens a lot of times with Raymond and I and other members of our team is we start to just try to tackle a problem, try to tackle what are all the things around it. And so moving tickets has been tough, especially for work that is, again, like we were doing a show about Latin American immigration during a time that ICE is in our city. And truly, the people that we most wish would come to that show are people who are maybe afraid to leave their
Right.
homes right now and definitely not going to trust a predominantly white institution that they don't have an existing relationship with. And so as we begin producing June Jordan, we're in parts of cohorts with other leaders. And I was part of a managing leader cohort with 2 colleagues based in Minneapolis. And so they were talking to us about just the strain on the community, the devastation that truly everybody is buying groceries for at least 2 of their neighbors right now. And so Raymond and I are talking. I'm like, yeah, the people who need and want to come to this work are contributing to mutual aid, or gas is outrageous. Like groceries are outrageous. Like
Right.
they can't get here. There are so many barriers. And truly one of the things that, was part of June's mission was that poetry is for the people. Art is
Everyone.
for everyone. It's not a
Right.
luxury. So we took the price barrier away and we leaned into the living ticket model, which has been around for many years now, that like wants you to acknowledge that we want artists to receive living wages. It wants to acknowledge all the realities that we're going through. So the reality is the show costs $93,000 to produce. If we filled all the houses to 75%, we'd need to charge $50 a ticket to pay everyone and to do what we need to do. Given that, and given your own capacity, we trust you to name a price that works for you, and you come on in.
I actually love that. And did you find that people really responded well to that model?
Yes.
Yeah. We are finding that community actually does exist. There are folks who will say, listen, I got $1 and that's what I can do. But then there are other people who have greater capacity who can actually take care of their neighbor indirectly. And so that's a really beautiful idea.
I think that's a wonderful idea. There are a few places where people do that with food, pay what you can model. And I've always admired that because I think it says so much about our belief in humanity.
Yeah.
That people really will do what they can do. I love that you've taken that on. Is that sort of temporary, or do you think you'll keep that model going?
We will see.
We'll iterate.
Yeah, we're going to iterate it.
You'll think about it. You're going to think of, no, I don't blame you. I also wonder if there's a way for people to access it if they're homebound online for a very small amount of money, if they want to see it online. But I'm just, again, trying to see how broad can you get your community.
I love it. Yeah.
It's more realistic with this play.
Yeah, probably. It's sort of interesting. And also you could still pay what you can in that context too. So you're very gutsy. What have you done that isn't gutsy?
I will jump in and say, one of the things that I think that makes us gutsy is we move at the pace of our humanity. And sometimes when we think about businesses, sometimes when we think about nonprofits, sometimes it is often for organizations about the product, getting it done. And the thing that I love about this staff, the thing I love about this team is that we move at the pace of our own humanity. And so that might mean things need to shift and change. That might mean that a lot within the business has to shift and change. But we're thinking about the humanity of our staff, our own humanity, as we attempt to build community and touch other people's humanity. I think that's what makes us gutsy. And then we're not risk averse to that in that way.
No, you have your priorities very clear and your values very clear. And that's up front. And I think that does make you gutsy. So what is something that outsiders or even a few insiders don't know about the Fountain Theater?
I'd venture to say that outsiders don't know how small our staff is. I've been told so many times people look at the outside of the organization and the history and the prestige of the organization, and they think that we're running an operation the size of like CTG or Geffen.
Yeah.
When in all actuality, like we have a staff of 5. And it's, that's limited. That's really limited for all the work we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's amazing, actually. Yeah. Johannah.
I would say one of the things that you don't know till you come in is just how welcome you are, exactly as you are. And it's palpable. You will feel it when you come in, that this is a place that has something for you and that you are welcome here.
Yeah, I love that. And people don't always recognize that whoever you are, whatever your agency is, you are welcome. I love that so much. And it's so important for people to know that who may be first-time goers and hadn't thought about that or hadn't experienced that before. So this may be a funny question for you all, but if you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about the Fountain Theater, who would that be?
Well, as a middle-aged Swiftie, I must say it's Taylor Swift. We would love to be the theater that develops the musical of female rage that was her Tortured Poets Department album. We would be happy. And in fact, as a cat lover myself, the Fountain Theater has a history of having theater cats. So she would be more than welcome
to bring her cats. I love it.
We would love to have her.
Right. I think you need to write a grant with that as the main thing and send it to her people. I think that's a great idea. And I like your framing of it because it is sort of, there's a bit of rage but I'm a Swiftie fan too. I think she's amazing. I think her lyrics are phenomenal.
Me too.
I really do, which a lot of people, you don't think of it, and she's overcome so much bias. It's incredible. And I'm really impressed. That's a good answer. I like that one. And I like the frame that you put around that too. I think you guys should produce that, and I think she should underwrite it and talk about it.
I love it. Come on, Taylor.
Yeah.
Or Beyonce or Rihanna. Fine.
Right. Any of them would be great, actually. True. But I think being a Swiftie fan, and also that she happens to have an album around rage, is sort of it's a good theme. It's an interesting theme. How do people find you? How do people learn and find out about the Fountain Theater? Is it fountaintheater.org or .com?
.com.
Okay, just so people know, that's great. And so people can find out all about you through your website, through LinkedIn, through Instagram, and hear what you're about and what you're doing and the programs. And any last comments or things that you want to say before we close out the podcast?
Hey, if you're discovering this podcast and hearing us after Poetry for the People closes, know that component to our work is always there. You're always invited to the cafe. You're invited to get there early, stay after, talk, connect. Like, we're always here for it. And so no matter which event you pick, we want to talk to you before and after, build community with you.
Yeah. And just from my personal experience, I felt totally at home. It was so wonderful. It was great to connect. I felt like I was not only engaged with the play itself, and then, of course, engaged because of the activity within the play that we were asked to do, which I loved. I also felt like I was going into a very warm and comfortable and inviting environment where you could just sit and hang out and have a cup of coffee or have a water or have a drink or have whatever, I actually had M&Ms, whatever it was. But I thought it was great. So I just want to take a moment and thank you both for spending this much time with me. I enjoyed every minute of this, and you two are incredible. And I love the idea of going into community and doing what I call focus groups, but you have another term, and I'm sorry if I don't, it's not my language, but I love it because the idea of someone providing input for this next production is brilliant. I love the relationship with Hollywood High School and the students and being able to do community service. And it sounds like you're doing that also with adults, or there'll be the opportunity to do that with retirees or adults. But it sounds like there could be a place for anyone who wants to show up and do something. So I encourage folks to go check it out, reach out to you, and be part of your community. You're the great equalizer. That's what you are. Yeah, I loved it. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Please go to smallandgutsy.org to check out all of our episodes. And if you're so inclined, please purchase some Small and Gutsy merchandise, consider sponsoring an episode, or making a donation. Both are tax deductible and help keep us going and spotlighting these great organizations. The opinions and viewpoints expressed by our guests are independent and don't reflect the position or views of Small and Gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, so before you sign on to support or work for them, we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, the donors, the sponsors, and my incredible board of directors, Brianna Carmichael, John Gatto, Lucy Mello, Ari McCoy, Melissa Greitz, and Serena Rajabian, who believed in me in this project enough so to sign on to support this effort, and all the folks, friends, and family who have guided and inspired me. And thank you for listening. Together, we are spreading social impact, and you can help us. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends. And don't forget to email me the name of any organization you feel would benefit from being interviewed. From small and gutsy to big with impact. I'm Dr. Laura Scherck Wittcoff, and thanks for listening.